Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to wait a couple more minutes to let a couple more participants join the webinar. Thank you. We'll be with you shortly. Thanks. Good afternoon again, everyone, and welcome once again to our Lunch and Learn series. This is the 15th presentation in our series on current and diverse topics. These presentations are a partnership between FIU Continuing Education, Camacol, and the Doral Chamber of Commerce, and are taking place on Thursdays from 12 to 1 Eastern Standard Time. My name is Milly Maldonado, and I am the Continuing Education Manager at FIU's Office of Academic Planning and Accountability. I would like to go over some housekeeping items before we start. Please note that the webinar is being recorded and that your microphones are muted. The chat tool located at the bottom of the screen is currently disabled and will be used to communicate information to the participants. We encourage you to use the Q&A tool located at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation to post questions related to the content of this webinar. The presenter will answer the questions as they come in. Once the webinar has ended, a message will appear on your screen thanking you for your participation today and asking you to please participate in a short survey about the webinar. Do not forget to complete it so that you can receive information about the upcoming events. I'm particularly excited today to share the virtual screen with our presenter. Ian McCluskey is Managing Director of Thinking Heads Americas, the Miami-based subsidiary of a Spanish consulting firm that specializes in leader positioning and is also one of the world's top speaker agencies. Ian is a former Canadian diplomat and journalist who spent 20 years in Latin America on assignments with Time Magazine, Bloomberg News, Brazil Watch and AméricaEconomia magazine, where he served as editor-in-chief and later as publisher. After a stint as director of thought leadership at Kroll Latin America, Ian founded his own consulting firm, Thought Leadership International, in 2010 and launched a series of high-level events in Central America, Miami, and Colombia called Business Connections. Ian then joined Thinking Heads in 2015, to expand the company's consulting and speakers business throughout the Americas. Ian has a master's degree in international management from the Thunderbird School of Global Management and a BA in international relations from the University of Toronto. Ian is fluent in Spanish, Portuguese, and French. So please welcome Ian McCluskey.
Okay, hi everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you, Millie, for the introduction. And thank you to the whole team at FIU Continuing Education for the invitation to come here today and share some ideas with you. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Danai and Jorge and Sharima, who've been so great and helped me figure out how this works. Look, before I start today, I'd just like to say and reassure everybody. Well, first of all, I ought to also thank the sponsors. Kamakol, thank you very much for sponsoring this series, as well as the Doral Chamber of Commerce. So what I was going to say was, I hope that all of you are going to be relieved, I certainly am, that I'm not going to be talking today, and hopefully we'll never mention COVID-19 or the coronavirus or the pandemic. Thought leadership was important before the pandemic, and it's important now. It's going to be important afterwards. So there's no thought leadership after COVID-19. So that's the last time I'm going to mention it. And honestly, it's a relief for me to spend an hour not thinking about it and not talking about it. So now, before I get into the actual topic of thought leadership, I think it's important that everybody know a little bit more about what I do and what Thinking Heads is all about. It's really two companies in one, and there's no other company in the world that has these two things together. And we started off 17 years ago in Madrid, Spain. The guy who created Thinking Heads, which is an awesome name, by the way, which is why I wanted to meet this guy. His name is Daniel Romero Abreu, and he created Thinking Heads 17 years ago. And he just turned 41. So he was 24 years old when he came up with this idea of creating a speakers agency in Spain. At the time, there was no real industry of speakers agencies. So, and today, 17 years later, we're the biggest speakers agency in Spain. And we just came out with our 2020 guide to the top 100 speakers, which you can see on the screen in Spain. In fact, that came out like 2 weeks before everything imploded at the end of February. So we're a speakers agency. And then we opened up Miami 6 years ago now. And I've been trying to expand the business across the Americas, and we've had quite a bit of success. And so today we're the largest speakers agency in the Spanish speaking world. And just to make it sort of more concrete, today, for instance, we have a speaker participating in e-commerce Brazil, which is the biggest online conference each year. Well, actually, before it was an in-person conference. This year, of course, it's online. Steve Wozniak is speaking today, and we put him together with the client. 2 days ago, we had Chris Anderson, the editor of Wired magazine, as the keynote speaker in the same event. A few weeks ago, we had Tony Nadal, who's an incredible motivational speaker, the uncle and coach of Rafa Nadal, and he was speaking at an online event with Banco Industrial in Guatemala. Next week, Miami's own Silvina Moschini will be speaking at a couple of events that the Chamber of Commerce of Santa Cruz de la Sierra in Bolivia is putting on, CAINCO, and she'll be talking about remote working. We have a speaker coming up, I think, in a couple of weeks. His name is Mike Wittenstein, and he's based in Atlanta, and he speaks about consumer experience or customer experience, and he'll be speaking at an event hosted by the Aiden International Business School in Argentina. So we're all over the place doing events. And just as an aside, you know, our business, as you can imagine, which was all about in-person events, completely collapsed at the end of February. And we had 2 months of nothing, and it was very depressing and scary, but the business is now coming back, and it's all online. For a while, everybody was doing free online events like this one, but now it's back, and people are paying again for talent. They're not paying as much as before. In fact, a guy like Steve Wozniak would charge $200,000 to be on stage before everything happened. I won't mention it, what it is. And today he's charging about 50,000. Still, it's a nice business, but it's a lot cheaper. So the other part of the business, excuse me, the other part of the business is the consulting business. And we often talk about being in the marketplace of ideas, right? So we work with speakers, with keynote speakers, and have done for all these years. These are our gurus, they're thought leaders, and then, but you know, delivering a keynote speech is only one way to get your message across. And 7 years ago, we started developing other ways to get that same message across. And we started out with a book by Felipe Gonzalez. In fact, Felipe Gonzalez was the first exclusive speaker with Thinking Heads, and still is a speaker today with Thinking Heads. The name of that book was En Busca de Respuestas, and since that book came out 7 years ago, we've published 60 or 65 books for other thinkers and great thinking heads. But then we expanded from there, and of course, ideas can be packaged many different ways. You can package ideas in a book, you can package ideas in a YouTube channel, you can package ideas in social media, you can package ideas in blogs. So now that's what we do. We help leaders or thinkers or impressive people. We help them shape their ideas, to package their ideas, to distribute their ideas, and to promote those ideas. And so everything we do, and we call it leader positioning, it's all about thought leadership. So, so this is what I want to talk about today. You know, thought leadership is, I mean, I don't know how many of you have a really clear idea of what it is. I think it's one of those concepts or terms that's sort of understood, maybe misunderstood by some people, and it's used interchangeably with other concepts. So, but I believe passionately in thought leadership. So first of all, I want to kind of share my definition. Let's talk about what is thought leadership, and then let's talk about what it means to be a thought leader, and then we can talk about some thought leaders that you and I admire and follow. I'd like to just focus on one thought leader. I've had an amazing idea, a global thought leader. I'd like to focus on one Miami thought leader, a good friend of mine, and one great idea that we came up with together. And then I'd like to make it a little more personal and talk about, okay, what does it mean to develop a thought leadership strategy? And oh, sorry, did I jump ahead? Yeah, I did. I want to talk about what thought leadership looks like and what shapes and forms it takes, and then talk about what it means for someone to think about being a thought leader. Where do you start? Where do you begin? What do you do? And finally, talk about something that's maybe misunderstood, and that's about how organizations can really profit in every way possible by positioning their executives as thought leaders. All right, so what is thought leadership? And for some reason, I can't see this properly. Let me move this down. Excuse me. There. Okay. So there are lots, I'm sure there's lots of definitions of thought leadership. This is my own definition, and it rings true to me. It resonates with me. Thought leadership is about enhancing your reputation, influencing people, and achieving your goals through the power of your ideas. Now, it's in bold for a reason. It's all about the power of your ideas and how you harness those ideas and how you leverage those ideas to enhance your reputation, to influence people, and achieve your goals. It works for me. I don't know if it works for you, but it's still kind of hairy-fairy, right? I mean, you need to explain it. But here on the next slide, if I can get it to the next slide, yeah. Here is the best definition I've ever heard. The only problem is it's a little cryptic, so it requires lots of explanation. And there's a story behind this. Bomb the beaches. I got a call from a good friend, and she said that she had a client who was head of a private equity firm, an important private equity firm based here in Miami, and that he was looking around and needed some help with his thought leadership. So when somebody says that, I get all excited because it always sounds to me like that person gets it. So I was very excited to meet this guy, and of course this was pre-crisis, and we had breakfast at the Green Streets Cafe in Coconut Grove. And so I asked him, I said, so why do you want why do you want help with your thought leadership? And he said, because I need to bomb the beaches. And then I sat there in sort of stunned silence for a couple of minutes. And I said, well, can you like fill in the blanks for me? Well, what does that mean? And he said, simple. He said, in my business, the private equity business, sometimes I come across an opportunity and I need to put together money, investors fast. Sometimes I only have a window of 3 to 4 weeks to put that money together. And one of my targets, particularly in Miami, he said, are the family offices in South Florida. And if you're not familiar with a family office, it's just a pool of investment money that's managed by wealthy families. And in Miami, most of them are from Latin America, but they're not part of an association. They're all very discreet, and there's probably more than 200 in South Florida. And so what he said is, so here's what I need from you. I want you to help me write a bunch of articles and publish them in places that family office investment officers would see them, so that when I call them up and ask them for money, they'll know exactly who I am. I want you to bomb the beaches so that when I make that phone call, they already know who I am. And so, that's nothing more than the idea that your reputation precedes you. And so he wanted to make sure that his reputation preceded him in a very positive way, so that when somebody picked up the phone, they'd always, oh, you're the guy who wrote that incredible piece about, the aviation industry in Latin America or whatever. So I love this idea so much that I changed the name actually of my company from Thought Leadership International, this is 6 years ago, to BTB Media, Bomb the Beach Media. I stole his idea. It was a great idea. By the way, there's a word reputation down at the bottom of the screen. That's a loaded word, and I'm not going to go into it. We could spend hours talking about, reputation, but basically reputation, your reputation rather, doesn't belong to you. It belongs to everybody else. Everybody else is the perception of you that you can help change, but your reputation is out there in the market. So if you bomb the beaches with some amazing content, hate that word, but I'll use it right now, thought leadership, then you can help change the perceptions about you. We'll get back to more of that. We're still on the what is thought leadership. So thought leadership always involves sharing something of value with other people, but asking nothing in return. It's about putting your expertise on display. It's about sharing your ideas, but never asking for anything, never trying to make a sale. It's not about that. It's putting yourself out there. Now, sometimes if you're good at it and you're willing to take the risk, it also means bearing your soul a little bit. And it certainly means putting your values out there as well. And so the more you can do that, when you're sharing your ideas and your opinions, the more authentic you will be. And when I was looking at the presentation earlier today, the word authenticity, if you haven't read the John Lewis op-ed today in the New York Times, do yourself a favor, because there's nothing more authentic than these words, this posthumous opinion piece written by John Lewis, Congressman John Lewis, who died 2 weeks ago today in the New York Times. Authenticity is what leads to trust. If people think you're authentic and you're sharing your ideas, then they will trust you. And thought leadership is also leading with ideas. It's not leading with image or celebrity or being a celebrity, internet celebrity. It's about your ideas. The ideas have much more substance and are much more lasting than the ephemeral image that you might portray. Thought leadership marketing is also the most effective form of marketing and positioning for any organization, and I will debate that with anybody. Now, below you'll see some other ideas, and sometimes when people are talking about, they're really talking about thought leadership marketing, but sometimes they give it other names. And inbound marketing is a term I see a lot, don't like it very much, but it's the same idea, is that you throw something out there, you seed the market, you provide some insights and so on, and then people will come in. You will draw them into your business because of those ideas that you've shared. Earned media is another term that's out there. Again, I don't think it's worth a lot. It's just the idea that rather than paying for advertising, you've put some ideas out there and the media is now covering you because you're a smart, interesting person with really cool ideas. And so that's referred to as earned media. It doesn't cost you anything, and it's very powerful, obviously. Then there's the term content marketing, which I really hate because the word content is so broad as to be meaningless. I mean, you know, a picture of your brother by the pool, you know, on Facebook is content, but also the most amazing photograph of the sunset with the lions in Tanzania, you know, is a piece of content that's worth so much more. Not to mention a big idea that you write about in an op-ed, for example. So content for me doesn't work. I think thought leadership also, and I'll say this is really important, is that when companies or agencies are talking about content marketing, unfortunately, there's a lot of people who are behind the scenes and they're talking about, you know, how to position your article or your blog or whatever it is on the internet so that that it's Google bait, so that the algorithm sees it. So you've got all they're thinking about is the algorithm. You know, they're not thinking about people and they're not thinking about ideas. So sometimes, you know, content can be pretty awful, but can be pretty effective too, simply because you got the keywords right. And search engine optimization is what I'm talking about. It's very valuable. I don't want to diminish the value of it, but it's not central to what we do. We call it leader positioning because thought leadership is at the core of everything we do in leader positioning. It puts the ideas at the center of everything we do. And the emphasis is on influencing people, not on influencing algorithms. And people believe in people, you know, so if you've got some really great thought leadership, and it will have an impact. There's just no question. And whether you get the SEO right or not, it's going to have an impact. So what does it mean to be a thought leader? So I just grabbed the definition from Wikipedia. It's a little surprising actually, but it says some of it, you know, fits with what I think of a thought leader. A thought leader is an individual or firm that is recognized as an authority in a specialized field and whose expertise is sought and often rewarded. Thought leaders are commonly asked to speak at public events, conferences, or webinars, and to share their insight with a relevant audience. Okay, so for me, it's weird that it says here a thought leader can also be a firm. I completely disagree with that. It's always about people. People believe in people. Sure, your firm can benefit by having thought leaders, but I don't see a firm as being a thought leader. Thought leaders, all these words fit. Is an authority on some subject, is an expert on some subject, although I think authority is a better word than expert. Expert sometimes suggests somebody who's so technically, has so much technical depth in something is an expert, doesn't necessarily mean that he's a great communicator. An authority for me carries more weight. A reference is obviously a thought leader, role model, guide, and teacher. And then there's an important word, I think, to describe any thought leader, and that's curator. Because if you're interested in a certain subject, then your thought leader, the person you follow, will help you get to the best information possible. And so those thought leaders can help all of us understand subjects better by curating all the good stuff that's out there. All right, so here's a question for everybody. Think about, you know, the thought leaders that you admire and follow. And I threw down some names here. These are the first names that came to my head. You know, there's thousands and thousands of thought leaders who we all admire. Malcolm Gladwell, you know, amazing author who's had some big ideas. He always has big ideas, then puts together some incredible books. The Tipping Point, Outliers, been many more. Seth Godin, I used to follow him religiously. He's a guru in business, management, marketing, and so on. Fred Wilson, but here's the one guy that I read religiously every single day. Fred Wilson, I don't know how many people have heard of Fred Wilson, but he is, I think, the co-founder of Union Square Ventures in New York City. And he's an expert on technology, on startups, on entrepreneurship and venture capital, and crypto. And here's the thing about Fred Wilson: for the last 16 years, he hasn't missed one day. Every single day he produces something on his blog, and every single day it's something that I find of value. The blog is called AVC, A Venture Capitalist. He's brilliant. So Laura Chinchilla, now we're getting closer to home. Laura Chinchilla, the ex-president of Costa Rica, is one of our top speakers, but she's also an incredible thought leader. She talks about leadership, women and leaders in particular. She talks about public policy and security. She was the security minister of Costa Rica security minister before becoming president, and is an extraordinary person who quite likely, and fingers crossed, will be the next president of the IDB, the International Development Bank. And that'll be announced in a couple of months. A local, now the rest are locals. Again, first names that came to mind. Nabil Malouli is a young guy who is the head of innovation at DHL Latin America. And he writes about e-commerce. He has a great little newsletter that he publishes, I think, Sunday nights or Monday mornings, about e-commerce around the globe, and he's great. Silvia Moschini, who I mentioned, who's speaking for us next month in Bolivia, she's an entrepreneur, she's amazing, dynamic woman, and she talks about remote working, women in tech, and so on. John Price, a wonderful old friend of mine who was the first thought leader I met when I came to Miami in 2003. He has a company called America's Market Intelligence, and he talks about business trends in Latin America, and he's quite brilliant. Akim Nowak is a guy who also has a newsletter that he publishes every early Monday morning, and is kind of my inspiration for the week. He talks about personal excellence and leadership. Akim's terrific. He's a coach and works for multinationals around the world. Fernando Garcia. So when I need to know something more technological or to do with technology, with 5G, with smart cities, with connectivity, with edge computing, he's my guy. So Fernando Garcia is currently the CEO of Vertiv Latin America, and they do all the infrastructure for data centers around the world, and so he's my guy. So Dr. Jerry Hart, to mention, an FIU professor. He's the authority on family-owned businesses, on competitiveness, also on business, and macroeconomy in Latin America. And of course, Andres Oppenheimer, that everybody knows. If you want to know about Latin American politics, he's the guy to read. And that's just a few. So here, I just wanted to mention a great idea and one thought leader. You know, Thomas Friedman has bigger microphone, or megaphone rather, than most of us. He has a bigger thought leadership platform than most of us. He's a New York Times columnist. And in 2005, he coined this phrase, the world is flat. And it started as a column or a series of columns, and he developed it into a book. And then it of course became a global, he was on a global speaking tour talking about his book and his ideas. And of course, any journalist knows that if you can put a title on something that is contrarian and surprising, then and provocative, then people are going to pay attention. The world is flat. We all know it's not flat. That's what makes this so interesting, because what he talked about in his book, as many of you will know, and which has sold millions of copies. As you can see, the number, last number I could find was 4 million copies in 2013. No doubt it sold 6 million or more. The idea was that the geography no longer matters, that with the dawn of the internet, there's now a level playing field for the whole world. Everybody who has a smartphone is now connected as much as anybody else to all the knowledge available in the world. So that was one thought leader and one amazing idea. And I want to bring it down a little bit to something that we can, this was yesterday as I was finishing up this presentation. I just noticed that Thomas Friedman I think I got an email yesterday to say that today at this exact time, Thomas Friedman speaking on Deal Book, which is published by the New York Times, about America's place in a pandemic world. And so he's a global thought leader, and I'm very grateful to all of you for listening to me and not to him at this moment. But let's bring it down to a local level. I want to briefly mention a very good friend of mine and a thought leader that I had the pleasure of working with for about a year. His name is Samuel Israel. He's the former CEO of DHL Latin America. He's CEO of Damco Latin America, which is another big logistics company owned by Maersk shipping line. And then he was CEO also of Damco Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. And so here's a guy with just immense amount of experience in the logistics field. And then he left and he decided that he wanted to do something new. And so we talked about it. We had breakfast, and then I brought him to meet the team, and we started talking about, you know, what could be next. And so we started working with Samuel and discovered that his passion was his passion, because that's what he wanted to get involved in, was talking about tech startups and mentoring tech-driven startups and blockchain-driven startups. So it took us a while, and but eventually we came up with the perfect message for Samuel. We started sharing his knowledge on social media. This is was his Twitter profile on Twitter, and we started sharing his ideas and in articles in Forbes magazine, other articles that he was writing about blockchain. He did a lot of homework to understand what blockchain was all about. And we realized that these startups, and there's lots of them, there's some in Miami, some on the West Coast, all across the country, who are trying to figure out how to apply blockchain to the logistics industry, which is one of the most promising applications of blockchain. And so these were young people, extremely talented data scientists and coders, but most of them didn't know anything about logistics. And so we just saw a huge opportunity, and Samuel did too. And so we created this tagline for him, from supply chain to blockchain. Now, you know, these things always seem easy after the fact, right? I mean, we came up with it together, and it was a perfect message for him. So after creating this idea for Samuel, and pushing out really interesting content and how he was talking about blockchain in the logistics industry, we soon got him in front of all sorts of startups who were dying to meet him and to have him on their board. And then finally, he became a keynote speaker, and I'm proud to say that we put him on the stage in Lima, Peru, just last year, talking exactly about this topic. That's one story about thought leadership and how it can be applied to somebody who, like Samuel, who is in transition and trying to make and have an impact in a new conversation. All right, so I've sort of touched a little bit on all these things. I apologize for this slide, which is pretty ugly. But basically, you know, thought leadership, it comes in many different forms. These are ideas that have to be packaged in certain ways. And on the left, you can see that they can be packaged as a book, they can be packaged as an op-ed, and so on. And then you have to decide, of course, you know, how am I going to distribute this information? How am I going to release this information, and where? Where am I going to promote it? Where am I going to publish it? A book, of course, can be published on Amazon. It can be promoted at Books and Books. You can have an author, as we have done with a couple of our authors, we can have an evening of listening to the author read from his book. Op-eds can be obviously in print or online media. Videos are incredibly effective, the most effective form of communication today. So videos can be put on a YouTube channel. It's not very complicated to create a YouTube channel for somebody. Social media, of course, is indispensable today. So your ideas need to be published, if not daily, several times a week on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever. Most of our clients, we recommend that they work pretty, or that they publish largely on Twitter and LinkedIn. For us, which is usually a B2B audience, those are the most effective channels. Blogs, of course, are extremely effective. Webinars, and a little shout out to FIU. I mean, this is what they've done here, and I actually have another slide. I'll go back to this other one in a sec. Okay, so this to me is like pure thought leadership. Millie had this awesome idea. Her team agreed that it was an awesome idea, which was to create a thought leadership platform called Lunch and Learn. and invite thought leaders to talk about and to share their knowledge and experience. So this is a thought leadership platform, and congratulations, felicidades, for launching this initiative. Let me go back. So webinars, live broadcasts are becoming more and more popular on Instagram Live, on LinkedIn Live, talk shows. There's no reason why a thought leader can't have his own talk show, right? Interviewing other thought leaders or other gurus in a particular area. We have a speaker who lives in Atlanta. He's from Colombia. His name is Felipe Gomez. He's a brilliant speaker, a former CEO, and he's created his own talk show in the last couple of months. And he's interviewing thought leaders from all over Latin America. It's an incredibly effective way of getting your message out on a regular basis to a lot of people and creating a community around what you talk about. Podcasts, Malcolm Gladwell, if I can read his or listen to his podcast, I do it every time I can. And of course, keynote presentations at South by Southwest, TEDx, Emerge Americas, wherever it might be. That's our bread and butter at Thinking Heads, and that's one way, of course. Now, below it says the answer is all of the above. If you're going to try and get your message out, then you really have to be on all the platforms these days, and that usually requires a lot of work, and it requires a team like ours at Thinking Heads to help you to do that. Not everybody has all the talents necessary to reach all those audiences through those platforms. So, okay, let's get a little bit more personal, and I'm going to finish in like 2 or 3 minutes. You want to develop your own thought leadership strategy. Where do you start? Well, first of all, you got to look at your resume. What do you have to offer? Where have you been? What's your history? In the case of Samuel Israel, it was obvious. He was the CEO of 3 companies, so he had a lot to work with, a lot of credibility in that topic. What are you passionate about? And that's really what matters the most. And that's all about, that's it right there. That's the most important thing. And then of course, why do your friends call you? So my friends call me to say, Ian, can you help edit my piece? Or can you, I have a friend who wants to be a keynote speaker. Can you help him out? And so on. So obviously that's my area of expertise. That's where that's what I'm passionate about. And I've got the resume to back it up. So that's what I talk about is thought leadership. And so once you've sort of thought through that process, then you got to figure out where you want to go. What conversation do you want to be in? Who do you want to reach? How do you want to reach them? And that, we'll go back to the previous slide, all of the above. And what do you want to achieve, which is really the most important question. And this is all very simplified, of course, because there are a lot more questions than that. But once you've figured it out, then you need to put together a strategy and then a detailed roadmap of how to get from A to B. Because that's the question we ask everybody, is, okay, you're already successful or you've been successful at something. What do you want to do now? And how do you, and how long do you want to take to get there? And I'll just mention one more of our clients briefly. Pau Gasol, who many of you may know, is like the Michael Jordan of Spain. He is a brilliant athlete. He's been on top of the game for 20 years. He won 2 NBA championships with the Los Angeles Lakers. He's not quite retired yet, but that's coming very soon. He just turned 40. He's currently with or on what's the word, well, he was injury, I guess. He was on injury time from the Portland Trailblazers. But his passion beyond sports is the prevention of childhood obesity. He has a foundation in Los Angeles, a foundation in Barcelona. And last week we helped him and his foundation put on a 4-day summit with more than 30 thought leaders from around the world talking about how to prevent childhood obesity, how to help kids eat better, to exercise more, and so on. It was an amazing success. We had, I forget how much money his foundation raised, but there were thousands of people who participated in the event. And finally, this is the big point here is, thought leaders obviously help enhance their own reputation, but they also help enhance the reputation of the companies they work for. By accident, 2 days ago, I got another email from the New York Times, and it was entitled, "Amazon is Jeff Bezos." Well, yeah, it's Jeff Bezos. He's the personification of Amazon. Just like Steve Jobs is still the personification of Apple. Mark Zuckerberg is the personification of Facebook. People believe in people. I remember, who was it? Mitt Romney once said that companies are people too. No, companies are not people, but they're made up of people. And if you have a thought leader who runs or is in a leader in your company, then there's all sorts of studies to show how the positioning, or let's say brand value of a thought leader contributes an awful lot to the actual brand value of that company. And I have an example here. You know, there's 3 major logistics firms in the world: UPS, DHL, and FedEx. I have no idea who the CEO of UPS is. I have no idea who the CEO of DHL is, which is owned by Deutsche Post. But I've always known that the CEO of FedEx is Fred Smith, because he's been a thought leader for 20, 30 years, always opining on important issues that have to do with international trade, patents, you name it. I mean, he's been a giant for years. And of course, he's still in the news. It was Fred Smith who pulled the plug on the Washington Redskins 10 days ago or 2 weeks ago, because it's the FedEx Stadium in Washington, and they're going to change their name, even though the owner had sworn that he would never do so. And it was Fred Smith who, again, put his values on the line and came out. And so I think Fred Smith provides a huge amount of value to FedEx. So to finish here, I just like to put out a thought. Thought leadership is never about you, and it's never about your company. It's not about what your company does or what your company makes, but it's about what you and your company stand for. So if you have an opinion about something, that's what you write about. You don't write about what your company is doing. You're not a spokesperson for your company. You're a thought leader, and you have opinions, and you share them. You ask nothing in return, and it has tremendous value in the marketplace. And so that's it. It's barely scratching the surface on the topic of thought leadership, but we had 20 minutes, and I hope we can go a little bit deeper. Look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you so much. I mean, and I am so proud that our FIU Continuing Education team is a thought leadership platform par excellence. I love it. So let's get to the questions, because we have quite a number of them.
Okay.
The first one is a comment and a question. So it reads, I studied strategic leadership to feel like a specialist as a way to empower the knowledge. What do you think of transformational leaders in times of crisis?
All right. Well, I promised I wouldn't talk about crisis, particularly this crisis. Look, transformational leaders it's a great question, because, but you already answered your question. They're transformational, period. And some people rise to crisis, some people don't, but if they're already transformational leaders, then I suspect that they will rise to the crisis. So that's the thing. We always look to our thought leaders during times of crisis or not for the way forward. I think I said, I had all those words there for thought leader: authority, reference, teacher, guide. So yeah, that's who we look for to, and perhaps even more so in times of crisis.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, authenticity and trust, from my humble experience, seems to be central to thought leadership. Could you please expand a little bit more on this?
Yeah, we have this sort of dilemma all the time when we're dealing with companies. With people, if it's an individual you're talking with, they're more than willing usually to be open about their opinions and their values, their feelings, and so on, and share those. Companies are much more hesitant to do so, right? So, the natural inclination from any marketing person at a company is to make sure the CEO, whoever it is, stays on message, which is just a horrible idea in my view. You want people to be authentic. What do you think? Look, when and I'm giving away my politics here, but who cares? So when Governor Cuomo got on television every single day during the crisis in New York City, he was being as authentic as I've seen anybody be. He would talk about his mother. He was afraid of his mother. He was talking about his kids. It was unbelievably authentic. So I don't know who could watch that and not have trust in that guy. Now, as a rule, do we have trust in politicians? Maybe not. But in that case, his authentic delivery, without worrying about, am I saying the right thing because my handlers, my PR people are telling me this is the message. No, I'm giving you the message from my heart. And when you do that, people get it. Now, as I say, companies are wary of this because they're afraid that, the CEO is going to, spout off and say something that doesn't really represent the company's values. You have to be careful of that, obviously, but people can tell when you're being authentic, and they can tell when you're just spouting the company line.
Okay, thank you, Ian. The next question, do you recommend people doing thought leadership themselves directly or through the use of a third-party professional firm?
Well, look, you got to start somewhere, right? So yes, everybody should do their own thought leadership, which means, and it doesn't mean you have to come up with new ideas. I mean, it means sharing ideas, first of all, because everybody's a relative thought leader, right? So a relative expert, because I can't call up Thomas Friedman and say, hey, Tom, what do you think about this? But I know other people who are like local people like John Price or Jerry Haar who do know, do have a better handle on the business trends, economic trends, and so on that I can call up. Everybody's a relative expert. So yeah, you need to develop your own expertise. And if you can afford it, of course, you want to hire people like us. But let me just explain what we do. The way I like to say it is, and I ask people, have you ever tried to run a marathon? Running a marathon, you run the marathon. Nobody's going to run it for you, right? But you might want to hire a coach, and the coach can help you get there. So I say that, at Thinking Heads, we put a team around somebody, a thinking head. We put a team around that person, and we help them. We're kind of like personal trainers for the brain. We're not personal trainers for the body, we're personal trainers for the brain. But at the end of the day, just like the marathon coach, it's not the coach who's going to run the marathon. It's the thought leader who has to come up. We don't invent anything for our clients. They come to us with knowledge and experience. And then, and I just see Adriana Machado just raised her hand. So Adriana Machado is on my list of thought leaders from Miami. And she's the former CEO of GE Brazil. And I'm delighted you're going to ask a question, Adriana. But she's a thought leader. But at the end of the day, it's all we do is help thought leaders get their message, package their message, distribute their message, and promote their message so that it reaches the right people and it has the biggest impact possible.
Thank you. The next question is, what are your recommendations for developing thought leaders to focus the increase of PYMEs, the small business leadership in America?
In Latin America or in America?
It says America, maybe Latin America.
Well, it's no different than anything else. It's just, who's the audience, right? So if you're a owner of a small business in Miami, you want to have more influence. You want to get obviously you do your marketing like any company does, but if you add thought leadership to the mix, then maybe you're on a board in the Miami Chamber of Commerce. Maybe you do a webinar on FIU continuing education. Maybe you find other ways locally to talk about your problems as a leader of a small business and share them. You join associations. That's all it is. It's sharing your ideas with the kind of people who can have an impact on your business.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if I answered that one very well, but maybe.
Thanks, Ian. This one's good. How do you find time to follow all these thought leaders?
Well, yeah, okay, yeah, you probably gave a bad impression. Look, nobody has time to follow them all, but the only guy I do read religiously every single day is Fred Wilson, because he never disappoints. And, I use that word curator. It's a really important word. So every Saturday, I think, he has his video of the week. So he says, if you want to watch one video this week, watch this one. And he explains what it's all about. He invested, he's a guy who invested in Twitter, in Tumblr, in Kickstarter, in Etsy, and a bunch of incredible, successful. So he knows more about, you know, technology and venture capital than anybody I've had ever I read. And he just knows how to communicate. Been doing it for 16 years. So he's my curator. He's my gatekeeper to that world, which is a world I'm interested in. So yeah, no, I don't have time. Like nobody has time. But I, you know, I try and keep up like everybody else.
Every so often, a little bit of each one. Thank you. What advice would you give to an aspiring thought leader who clearly has knowledge on a topic, but perhaps is not skilled or experienced in communicating, writing, speaking those ideas?
Right. Nobody's you know, got all those skills necessarily. But you know, if a tree falls in the woods and nobody hears it, you know, did it really fall? You know, communication is the key. You've got to get that idea out there. And so it starts by those three things. You know, what are you good at? You know, what conversation you want to be in? And then start following, you know, people that you think are the thought leaders in that space. And then start slowly, obviously, and piece by piece, sharing that with your community, so that you become a curator for those people. Let's say, because you're a relative expert on AI, or you're a relative expert on digital transformation because that's your passion, well, then people will start looking to you to be the gatekeeper or the guide for them. And then, yes, you know, everybody needs an editor. Everybody needs an editor. I don't care how smart you are, how good you are. And there are people that we hire. We hire writers. We hire editors. We hire presentation coaches. Our presentation coach, somebody is well known in Miami. Her name is Rosemary Ravinal, and she is great. And she's helped a lot of our speakers perfect their presentations. Nobody's perfect. And that's probably the most important thing to understand. No matter how smart you are, you need an editor, you need a coach to make you even better.
Thank you. Is the center of purpose for thought leadership human relations?
Well, people believe in people, yeah. So yeah, human relations. Well, boy, everything's about people, right? And people believe in people. So yeah, I believe in Fred Wilson. He's my guy. I believe in all the thought leaders I listed. Those are the people I would trust in to give me what I need to understand. So yeah, sure. Again, you know, the Wikipedia definition is wrong. I think firms are not thought leaders. Thought leaders are people. And yes, and they need to communicate. They're only thought leaders if they know how to communicate.
Exactly. And it's a human thing also. So thank you. How can you encourage your team to stay engaged in spreading the company message during these times that the business model is not the same?
The business what?
Model. El modelo.
Yeah, you know, wow. Our business has been turned completely upside down. And inside out. And we were, like I said, we were depressed for 2 months, and we thought we'd never do any more business again, until all of a sudden it started again. There was a spark. And now we realize in our business, which is in-person events, that companies still have budgets. Companies desperately need motivation. They desperately need inspiration. They desperately need to be talking about, I'm not talking about it, but everybody else is, you know, what's post-COVID-19 world look like? That's what everybody's talking about. So everybody's looking for answers, and even more so than before. So our business has now come back with a fury. It's online, but people are still willing to pay for authenticity. They're willing to pay for talent, and they're willing to pay for name recognition to be able to bring those people into the audience. So in time, how do you keep your team? hire a great speaker to talk to them about, how to work remotely. Silvina Moschini is our sort of go-to person on working remotely. She's an expert. So bringing in a motivational or inspirational speaker is one way. I mean, that's the way I know. I mean, that's what I do for a living, but I'm sure there are a million other ways.
Okay, thank you, Ian. The next one, great class on thought leadership. Great to have Ian and Millie join forces to give more visibility to the great thought leadership we have in South Florida. Question to Ian. What is your recommendation for top leaders to empower more leaders in his or her organization?
Did that come from Adriana? No, who's that from?
Yes.
It sounded like it. Really?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay. I think you're the expert on that. You should answer that question, Adriana. You were the CEO of GE. One of the great things about real leaders, are the ones who mentor others in their firm and are not afraid of getting out of the way. And I'll just, I don't know if Samuel Israel, is he participating today? Millie, did you see him?
Samuel, I think so, yes.
Okay, well, so here's another thing about Samuel. So on the list of thought leaders that I read out, there was another one from DHL, and that's Nabil Malouli. So Samuel was the one who gave Nabil the space he needed to become a thought leader. I think it's getting out of the way. I think it's always ego, right? If you can check your ego at the door, recognize how smart other people are, that you're not the most smartest person necessarily in the room. Nabil now, he's a young guy, he's blossomed into a keynote speaker. We had him as a speaker in Quito in January before the market crashed, and he's brilliant. And I read his newsletter. It's very short, but it's on e-commerce, and so I think it's getting out of the way. And I think, Adriana, you've had experience doing that, and I commend anybody who does that. It's great leadership.
Thank you. We have many more, so we're going to try to see how we can manage the time. So this is awesome. How thought leaders manage to mix and balance such a profound expertise in a given matter with unconscious bias?
Unconscious bias. Unconscious bias that's kind of loaded. Are we talking about, they're pretty separate kind of ideas. You can still be a thought leader. You can demonstrate unconscious bias in your own company, but that's sort of a different matter. I'm a little confused by the question. By the way, we had an incredible client for over a year. Her name is Hillary Bass, and her specialty is unconscious bias. We helped her to launch the Bass Institute of Diversity and Inclusion. So that's her topic, unconscious bias. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure rambling, sorry.
Okay, so the next one, who will be the thought leader for digital transformation in Latin America?
Boy, there's lots. It's such a, like I said, Fernando Garcia, for me, is the first guy I go to if I have a question on digital transformation. He has a really great presentation about how the current crisis has accelerated digital transformation in companies. I mean, we wouldn't be doing this right here if it weren't for the crisis we're in today. So he's a reference for me. Marcelo Cataldo, who's the CEO of Tigo Guatemala. Tigo Colombia would be another reference for me on that. Jonathan Lloydy is a professor of innovation and other things from Argentina. He's brilliant on that topic. There's a lot. And if you Google digital transformation speaker or ponente or conferencista, you'll come out with lots. But those are three that come to mind.
Okay, so let's do one more in the interest of time, and then we'll be able to send you the questions and you can email them, with the responses. So thought leaders need to develop their own fact check do thought leaders need to develop their own fact check in order to reduce the risk of misinformation?
Yeah, look, it's always embarrassing when you make a mistake, but I guess I would say, go for it first. And, we're all going to make mistakes. But yeah, you don't want to put out a lot of misinformation. Otherwise you'll get a bad reputation. As I said, you don't own your reputation, but you can change the perceptions of how people perceive you. Fact checkers are important. That's if you're in a company, then you want your communications director or your marketing director or to make sure that what you're putting out has been well written, well researched, and is factual.
Okay, super. Ian, thank you so much. I mean, we're right on at 1 o'clock, so we want to be respectful of everybody's time. So thank you again, Ian, for being part of the Lunch and Learn series. And thanks again to Camacola and the Doral Chamber of Commerce for their partnership, to Ms. Mercedes Ponce, our Assistant Vice President for Academic Affairs at FIU. I also want to thank the continuing education team, Dr. Jorge Sumaeta, Danai and Sharima, who were key in making the webinar a reality today. I also want to remind you before we end the meeting to complete the survey. Once the meeting ends, a screen will pop up, asking you to please complete the survey. That way you can receive more information about upcoming webinars. I also want to invite you to join us next week on Thursday for the next webinar, which will be on Faster Forward to a New Economy and the Implications for Higher Education. This webinar will be presented by Jim Fong, who's the Chief Research Officer at the University Professional and Continuing Education Association. This webinar will also be in English. So Ian, would you like to say a few words before we close?
Well, no, thanks very much for the opportunity. It's been a treat, and congratulations to you and your team for putting on these webinars. I mean, I hope today was helpful, and thank you to you, thank you to the sponsors, and thanks to everybody else for taking some time out of your day to join me. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everybody. We look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you again, and be well and be safe. Have a good afternoon. Thanks.